And I'm live. Thanks to Facebook being down, this is the first week. Well, welcome first to another episode of Mondays with Miko. And this is the first week that I am only on YouTube and Twitter. I added Twitter today since Facebook is down. Oh my goodness. I hope you guys can find me. If not, you always can watch it on the replay because today's topic is 40 acres and a mule. So before I get to that, I am going to play a quick, ironically, YouTube video. It's about 5 minutes and 28 seconds, and it is about 40 acres in a mule. So I'm going to go ahead and play this now, and then I will be back and we'll start the show immediately after the video. But if you're finding me on YouTube, thank you so much for joining. And I can see your comments. Okay, so if you comment on YouTube, I can indeed see your comment. But for now, let's go ahead and watch this short video.
It came so sudden on them, they wasn't prepared for it, recalled one liberated slave. Just think of whole droves of people that had hardly ever left the plantation, turned loose all at once with nothing in the world but the clothes on their back. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation had freed slaves across the South. But Washington still had no clear plan for what to do once African Americans were free. On January 11th, President Lincoln sent his Secretary of War, Edwin M. Stanton, to Savannah. Stanton instructed General Sherman to set up a meeting with some of the city's black ministers. He wanted to hear how the freedmen imagined their future in the South. That evening, 20 black men entered the grand parlor as guests of Stanton and Sherman. 16 were former slaves. They chose Reverend Garrison Frazier, who had purchased his freedom 9 years earlier, to be their spokesman. For the first time, federal officials conferred with freed slaves about the future of African Americans in the South.
The exchange that occurs between Sherman, Stanton, and the Union generals and Reverend Frazier is one of the extraordinary moments of the Civil War and the ending of the Civil War. Because they asked Frazier not just what should we do with all these refugees, they asked him questions about what the war meant. They asked him questions about what the Emancipation Proclamation had meant. They asked him what the presence of black troops in the Union Army meant. And in many ways, you'll find no better definition of the meaning of the Civil War and the kinds of answers that Garrison Frazier gives that day in Savannah.
The freedom, as I understand it, promised by the Emancipation Proclamation, is taking us from under the yoke of bondage and placing us where we could reap the fruit of our own labor.
To be a slave, as one of these ministers pointed out to General Sherman, was to be someone who had no control over his life's decisions. And now, these people feel the need to express their abilities, their choices.
The way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land, and we can soon maintain ourselves and have something to spare. We want to be placed on land until we're able to buy it and make it our own.
This was a man who never left probably coastal Georgia in his life. But he understood the Declaration of Independence. He understood the Emancipation Proclamation. And beyond that, he said, in effect, you should give us our rights, and you should protect our rights, and then you should leave us alone and let us be citizens.
4 days later, anxious to get thousands of freed slaves off his hands and Washington off his back, General Sherman issued Special Field Order 15. It was only a temporary order, but it became one of the most controversial of the Civil War. Plantations in the rice country had been abandoned by white planters during the war. 400,000 of these acres would be given over to African Americans for settlement. The huge land tract included the Sea Islands and parts of the Georgia and South Carolina coast.
40 acres of land will be given out to each family. Plus, Sherman says the Army's got tons of mules, which we don't really need. They're broken down from our long march. If anyone wants a mule, they can have one of these mules. This is the origin of that famous phrase, 40 acres and a mule.
Here was a real revolution. A revolution in the land, on the land, a chance to be their own freeholders.
For 4 million African Americans in the South, news of 40 acres and a mule spread as fast as the contagion of freedom itself. Many saw this as proof that emancipation would finally give black men and women a true stake in the land they had toiled on for centuries.
Wow, y'all, we're going to unpack all of that. I hope you were able to catch it. If not, you can just play it back on replay. And I miss my live audience. YouTube is a little bit different. I'm going to build up my YouTube audience, okay? So what I want to do is I just got back from Savannah, y'all. I went to Savannah. Let me take off that banner. I went to Savannah over the weekend. And it was another banner to remove. 1 second. And it was so educational, right? I love Savannah. I think it's a great city to visit. It's so full of history. And what I love about Savannah is that they stay true to their history. They don't sugarcoat it as some other South Carolina cities. They put a little bit of lipstick on it, but there's so many monuments and statues, and there's so much to learn in the city of Savannah, and have fun and have great food, so I just love it. And I don't have the Freedom Trail tour, y'all. It don't matter your ethnicity, you gotta go. The tour director, Mr. Brown, is just incredible. And we went to an art museum as part of the tour. And I made some little purchases. But this one purchase I made is a copy of General Sherman's Special Field Order number 15. And I wanted to read it. I wanted to read it just as it was on today's show. A lot of times, our history is played with in America for the benefit of politics. But it's time for change. We need to understand the real history without the noise. What really happened, right? And so I'm still trying to unpack it, but I'm going to read it, right? So bear with me, guys. Okay, so so remember what the video just set up is General Sherman. He had powers, right? So the Civil War's over. The South has lost. The Union Army is victorious. Slavery is ended. Okay, so the Civil War was over. Slavery, it's over. And so General Sherman had powers. And just like the video said, he went to Savannah to meet. He was beckoned, but he went to Savannah to meet with clergymen, reverends, to talk about, now that slavery is over, now what? And this is where the concept, or not the concept, what's the better word to say? The phrase 40 acres and a mule comes from. It comes from this order right here. So I'm going to read it. And, I was able to actually purchase it at the museum. And it was just quite interesting. And, it was all scrolled up like this, right? So let's go ahead and read it. Special Field Order number 15, Military Division of the Mississippi, Savannah, Georgia, January 16th, 1985. The islands from Charleston south, the abandoned rice fields along the rivers for 30 miles back from the sea, and the country bordering the St. Johns River, Florida, are reserved and set apart for the settlement of the Negroes now made free by the acts of war and the proclamation of the President of the United States. Number 2, at Beaufort, Hilton Head, Savannah, Fernandina, St. Augustine, and Jacksonville, the blacks may remain in their chosen or unaccustomed vocations, but on the islands and in the settlements hereafter to be established, no white person whatever, unless military officers or soldiers detailed for duty, will be permitted to reside. Let me repeat that. No white persons whatever, unless military officers and soldiers detailed for duty, will be permitted to reside, and the sole and exclusive management of affairs will be left up to the freed people themselves, subject only to the United States military authority and the acts of Congress. By the laws of war and the orders of the President of the United States, the Negro is free and must be dealt with as such. He cannot be subjected to the conscription or forced military service, save by the written orders of the highest military authority of the department, under such regulations as the President or Congress may prescribe. Domestic servants, blacksmiths, carpenters, and other mechanics will be free to select their own work and residence, but the young and able-bodied Negroes must be encouraged to enlist as soldiers in the service of the United States to contribute their share towards maintaining their own freedom and securing their rights as citizens of the United States. Whenever 3 respectable Negroes, heads of families, shall desire to settle on lands and shall have selected for that purpose an island or locality clearly defined within the limits of the above designated, the inspector of settlements and plantations will himself. Now you see why I don't say it nobody's plantation. Let's keep going. And plantations will himself, or by such subordinate officers as he may appoint, give them a license to settle such an island or district, and afford them such assistance as he can to enable them to establish a peaceful agricultural settlement. The 3 parties named will subdivide the land. So it's referring back to whenever 3 respectable Negroes, right? The 3 parties named will subdivide the land under the supervision of the inspector among themselves in such orders as may choose to settle near them, so that each family shall have a plant of no more than 40 acres of tillable ground. And when it borders on some water channel with not more than 800 feet waterfront, in the possession of which land the military authorities will afford them protection until such time as they can protect themselves, or until Congress shall regulate their title. The quartermaster may, on the requisition of the inspector of settlements and plantations, place at the disposal of the inspector 1 or more of the captured steamers to ply between the settlements and 1 or more of the commercial points heretofore named in orders, to afford the settlers the opportunity to supply their necessary wants and to sell their products of their land and labor. Whenever a Negro has enlisted in the military service of the United States, he may relocate his family in any one of the settlements at pleasure and acquire a homestead and all other rights and privileges of a settle, as though present in person. In like manner, Negroes may settle their families and engage on board the gunboats or in fishing or in navigation of the inland waters without losing claim to land or either advantage derived of this system. But no one, unless an actual settler as above defined, or unless absent on government service, will be entitled to claim any right to land or property in any settlement by virtue of these orders. 2 more. 5. In order to carry out this system of settlement, a general officer will be detailed as inspector of settlements and plantations, whose duty it shall be to visit the settlements, to regulate their police and general management, and who will furnish personally to each head of family, subject to the approval of the President of the United States, a possessory title in writing, giving as near as possible the description of the boundaries, and who shall adjust the claims or conflicts that may arise under the same, subject to the like approval, treating such titles altogether as possessory. The same general officer will also be charged with enlistment and organization of the Negro recruits by protecting their interests while absent from their settlements. Okay, so they're in the military, so they got to protect their settlements, and will be governed by the rules and regulations prescribed by the War Department for such purposes. Last one, 6. Brigadier General R. Saxon is hereby appointed as Inspector of Settlements and Plantations and will at once enter on the performance of these duties. No change is intended or desired in a settlement now on Beaufort Island, nor will any rights to property heretofore be acquired by affected thereby. So that was a lot. But I just read to you in its entirety the Special Field Order number 15, which was what we all refer to as 40 acres and a mule. And if you're just joining, you didn't get a chance to listen to the beginning, there's a video at the beginning that talks about 40 acres and a mule. And so one of the things that was said, because in this Special Field Order, in which General Sherman had powers, he wrote this order. There were other orders that were written. Such as the end of slavery, right? So this is wartime. This wartime. This Confederate Army had lost, had been defeated. The Union Army had won. Slavery was ended. Created this order. And this order granted Negroes 40 acres. Where the mule came from is that, they had some beat down mules from the war that they weren't using. And they said, you Negroes can have it if you want it. But the 40 acres is yours. So here I am in Savannah, which was an amazing weekend, y'all. I did not expect to run into this. I just didn't expect to run into 40 acres and a mule on my long, enjoyable weekend, but I did. And so, one of the things that we have to do as a people, no matter your color, is we can no longer kind of sidetrack our history. We have to embrace our history. This is not ancient history, y'all. January 16th, 1865. Slavery ended in 1863. My great-grandma was born a slave. My mother-in-law was born in 1927. Her grandmother was born a slave. So, there's people that prefer, we just don't talk about it. That wasn't me, but that was our government. These are government orders. This is owed to people who look like me, or people who look like me and are descendants of African slaves, which I am, and I am proud to be. I am not a descendant of people who are here. I'm not American Indian. I'm African American. My ancestors were African, and I am proud of that. And there's no reason, young people, old people, to be ashamed of that. I proudly wear this nose, this skin color, the blood that runs through my veins. I'm proud of it. And I will fight every single day till I have no more days left for what is owed to them. Hence, me and my descendants. So, let's talk about the whole 40 acres and a mule. The government owes us that. That's a whole nother, not the mule, the 40 acres. That's a whole nother discussion. Let's talk about where we are today. African Americans. The redlining that has kept us from being able to own legitimate property, even though we could afford it. The redline that has kept our neighborhoods intact. The land that we lose every day in America, especially in the South, primarily in the South, I want to think, because we do not have wills. So, heir property is basically you taking what your ancestors worked so hard for, be it your grandmom just one generation ago or your great-great-grandmom. It's hard for them to get land. So they got it. They got a house. And then they passed away without a will. So the way the inheritance goes, it creates a mess. So I'm telling everybody who can listen. If you can listen, you can tell somebody, work on your wills now. Make sure that your hard work is not in vain, that beautiful house that you're living in right now, all the improvements and upgrades that you would have made to your beautiful house, that you have an heir that can claim it singly. So a lot of people, they even have wills, and if they have a will, they want to leave it to all their children. You cannot leave one house to 4 kids. In my family, it's me and my brother. I can't live with him. I love you, Jamal. Cannot live with you. We have grown up. We live in different houses. So if you're a property owner of any sort, stop what you're doing. Make a plan this week to build your will. Very, very important. Very, very important. And on that note, especially in the county that I live in Marion County, there's a lot of property that needs to be bought. It needs to be bought. It needs to be redone. It's a great investment. If you are a person of color, it's time to buy the hood. We need you. And this is our property. This is ours, right? So, you talk about a settlement. Instead of getting 40 acres, maybe you were able to get a half an acre, or somebody was able to get a quarter acre. Well, that's available. Buy it. Help us build back the community. Help us keep the community as a community. But we can't do it. So if you happen to be originally from Marion County and you live someplace else, you live in California, you live in New York, you live in Massachusetts, it's time to invest. We need you. Your country needs you. Your ancestors need you. And the people here need you. And that don't mean just buy it and let it go. That means buy it, invest in it, maybe be a decent renter, maybe do an Airbnb. We're 1 hour away from Myrtle Beach. It's amazing. It's a great investment property. We could talk about that a little bit more. So one of the things that I saw on the tour was a lot of gentrification. And in Savannah. And it's everywhere, right? It's in Philly, it's in Charlotte, it's in Savannah. So what is gentrification? Gentrification is where communities that had one identity are now changing into another identity. So our tour guide was sharing with us properties that at one point, could have been bought were purchased for $1,000, $2,000, $10,000, and they're now selling for, a couple $100,000. But the people who are living in those homes are no longer African American. He shared with us there was a lady she passed away. She left the house to her family, to her heirs, and some money, and they blew through it. Took a second mortgage, not second mortgage. They took a reverse mortgage on the house. The house is now gone. He said the people are moving out next week. So what happens? And then we also talked about like Cabrini Green in Chicago and all of those projects and hoods that are just being obliterated. Well, just imagine how many voting precincts were in one high-rise tenement in Chicago. So if they tear that down and they put up townhouses, well, that then decreases the Black vote. That can happen anywhere. That can happen anywhere. And so in the town that I live in, it's slowly, slowly, slowly bleeding out, because what's happening is that these houses are here, but they're abandoned. So nobody's living in them. Nobody's living in them. There's no voice in that home. There's no voice in that property. I have an abandoned house in the front of me. I got an abandoned house behind me. We got to change that. We have to change that. Land is power. These ministers and General Sherman, they sat around the table in 1865 and they realized that land was power. Land was going to give slaves the ability to be independent. And now descendants of slaves just letting it go. Can't do it. So I found that all interesting. I'm becoming a little bit of a really, I don't want to say a history buff, but like living down here, when you can read about something and then you can go there and you could see it and you could touch it and you could touch the actual land that our ancestors would have walked on, and you can hear things like, the whole concept of how I even became a picket. That we, for the most part, African Americans, we had a choice. When slavery ended, we had a choice. We had the freedom to choose our own names. Some people chose names based on our occupations. Smiths, tailors. If they were a tailor, they became a tailor. Browns, based on colors, browns, greens. Some of them took the name of their former slave owner, their master. Some of them picked popular names that they liked. Washington, Jackson's. But one thing that the tour guide said that I found quite interesting is that he said, think about it. No African Americans. Think of an African American with the last name Lincoln. Because remember, we are divorced a couple hundred years from the end of slavery. So, what we have to go on is the history. So these folks could all choose their names. They chose Washington, they chose Jackson, they chose Johnson. They did not choose Lincoln. Food to think about. Food for thought. So I'm going to be slowly working some more of this into the chats with Mondays with Miko. Let me see, where am I on time? I'm almost at time. But a couple things I did want to tell you about. You can see it scrolling at the bottom. We got a vaccine clinic this weekend from 9 to 12 as usual at our usual spot at the Mac T Hines Health and Enrichment Center. The first 50 will receive a $50 gift card as usual. And we also will have a food truck out there this Saturday. This is a new thing that we're doing. So, and if you're not registered to vote, come on down, register to vote, and partake in our food truck and socialize with us. If you're not, we are doing boosters. So if you had Pfizer and you are 65 and above, or immune compromised, or really just about all of us kind of qualify if you live around here, because it also says if you live in a community that's at risk, and we're all at risk. There's so many factory workers. You have to work in close proximity. So, but we are giving boosters. It has to be 6 months. It has to be 18 and older and 6 months from your second shot, and you can come on Saturday and get a booster. Okay. Why is it so important? Why do I keep talking about the vaccines? Is because people in our community are dying. And it's sad. I get phone calls a lot. And the latest kind of phone calls are coming from folks that are sharing that they can't get to the hospital. They have something really hurting on their back, as an example. And, they call 911 and they can't get into the hospital. The hospitals are full. They're told not to go. I had a friend, close friend, dear friend. She just passed away. The day before she passed away, I was talking to her last week. And she shared that she actually called 911. They came and didn't take her to the hospital. Hospital's full. So how do we get out of this? Stop filling up the hospitals. Why fight something you don't need to fight? Get vaccinated. You may get a breakthrough. You may get a side effect. But you'll be okay. You'll pull through. Please get vaccinated. I think that's all. I'm looking at my notes here to see if there's anything else I wanted to cover. Saturday, Mac T. Hines Health and Enrichment Center. Please come out. I hope this was helpful. This format is weird. I miss my folks that are usually on and commenting back with me. So I will be checking. Hopefully Facebook will be up tomorrow. And I'll be able to post this video onto Facebook. Please post your comments and I will reply via comment or via messenger. And I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, wonderful week. And I hope to see you on Saturday at the vaccine clinic. We Care Coalition. Take care.